Hello, everyone. It's Nick again. Welcome back to Backseat to Right Seat. This is going to be my second video. In this video, I will talk about basically the 3-year process that I went through to go from an Air Force backseater or a combat systems officer or WSO to a first officer. All right. The first thing I did is I came up with a plan in 2020 for what I needed to do over the next 3 to 4 years to make this happen. So basically, in 2020, in the middle of COVID, I was 31 years old, and I set a goal for myself. I said, basically, if I can become an airline pilot or a Part 91K commercial pilot by the time I was 35, so 4 years out, then the money that I would spend doing that would probably be worth it because that would still give me like 30 years of doing that. And I basically was able to justify spending a lot of money over 4 years with the goal being where I'm at today at 35 years old. What I ended up doing, though, is I ended up staying in the military for about another 4 years, getting all my ratings while I'm in the military, basically in my free time, and then also building my flight time at the same time. That plan actually worked out really well for me. I was able to leave the military with my commercial multi-engine license and a little over 1,000 hours of flight time. So back in 2020, that's when I got my private pilot's license. The first thing I did is I looked for a CFI that was able to build off my knowledge that I already had being an aviator in the military. And that worked out pretty great, actually. I think I'd finished my private pilot's license for like under $10,000. I think it was like $8,000. I had the minimum amount of flight time. I was actually able to count 10 hours from IFS, those 10 hours that you get flying a DA-20 with actual FAA CFIs. If you get those logged, you can actually count that flight time. All right, so I get my private pilot's license, and then I'm kind of scheduling out my ratings, my flight time for the next 3 years. And what I realized is I needed to fly somewhere between 300 hours and 500 hours every year to have a substantial amount of time, at least 1,000 hours by the time I get out, so I can probably get some kind of job. And kind of my goal ended up being 300 or 30 hours every month. And if you do the math on that, if you're renting for all of that, that gets really expensive really quick. So what I decided to do is I decided to buy a plane. Now, I will say being an aircraft owner was a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. But it also is really fun too. That honestly is kind of like a mission in itself. You learn a lot about the regulations. You know all the ADs on your plane. You know the hours between them all or the time between them all. You schedule obviously all the maintenance, the annual. If there's an AD that comes up before the annual, you got to find like an A&P to do that work for you, like one off, or do that inspection for you. So it is a lot of work, but if flight time's something you need, I would definitely recommend considering buying your own plane. When I did all the math, it basically came out to, I think it was around 50 or $60 an hour. I needed about 1,000 hours. I needed to build in this thing, so $60,000 is kind of a rough hack on how much it would cost me to build the flight time. $60 a flight hour for me did include the maintenance, the hangar. The fuel's honestly about half that. Was like $30 a flight hour was just the fuel. Looking back, there's actually ways to do that for a little bit less money. There's some planes. My plane burned about 6 to 7 gallons per hour on like a long cross country. But there's planes that do it that you can get down to about 4 gallons per hour. So you can definitely save money. All right. So I basically buy this plane, and then my mission becomes flight time, flight time, flight time. I'd go before work. If sometimes I'd leave work, I'd stop at the airport on the way home and get like an hour of flight time in, and then go home. I would fly for like 7 or 8 hours on Saturdays. Try to make it as much fun as I could. And I would go to. I pretty much went to like every airport in the West in Western Washington. So that was, I guess, that was cool. It was cool to see all those different places. I flew all the way down the West Coast. If I was going TDY for the military, and I did a lot of TDYs or military trips to other Air Force bases that were just like a couple states away, I would actually just fly there and fly home. And you can actually get reimbursed as long as your commander approves it, that form of transportation. There's a way in DTS to actually get reimbursed for those. So I flew from Washington down to Nevada and Washington to Idaho a couple different times. And those were like 10 or 11, 12-hour day trips. Some other ways to save money. This is probably the best way, or one of my more common ways, I should say, is find someone to be a safety pilot. So one of us would wear the goggles or the foggles, and one of us would be the safety pilot, and we would just fly places like all day long on those Saturdays. And the nice thing about that is I gave those guys usually a really good deal. Like I would charge them like 20 or $30 a flight hour. Like about half of what my cost would be, and that's a good deal for them too, right? Because they're getting 10 hours for like 20 or $30 an hour, and it's cutting my cost basically in half. So that was a nice thing to do. All right, in the summer of 21, that's when I got my instrument rating. I used my GI Bill to go to a Part 141 school, vocational school, to get that instrument rating done. And in the next summer, so summer of 2022, that's when I started working on my commercial pilot's license. Now with the commercial, this was kind of interesting because the requirement for commercial is you need to have 250 hours. Well, I was already doing a lot of time building on the side, right, with my own plane. So the 250 hours was not going to be a limitation. So what I ended up doing was I used the GI. The GI Bill will only pay for a Part 141 program. But the Part 61, if you want to get your commercial license, Part 61, that's what requires the 250 hours. Well, I think the Part 141 program is the syllabus there had like a 220-hour syllabus, so that's a lot of money out of the GI Bill. So what I actually ended up doing was I found a flight school, the Part 141 vocational flight school, that allowed me to come up with a plan to maximize my GI Bill. So basically, I used my GI Bill to pay for my commercial flying lessons, but I made sure all those lessons were fulfilling the Part 161 requirements in the FARs, if that makes sense. So it was a Jeppesen syllabus, and it it had like 30 flights. Flight 1, this is what you do. Flight 2, this is what you do. And I'm looking at all those, and I'm just making sure that all those things that are written in there are also filling all my Part 61 flight training requirements. Because I knew once I just met those like flight training requirements of Part 61 that says you need to be taught in this thing, and this thing, that, plus I had all my 250 hours, I had my night flight time, I had my simulated instrument flight time. So I knew basically I could use my GI Bill to pay for the flights required to meet the Part 61 requirements, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that well, but that's what I did, and I was very clear with my instructor that was my plan, and he was on board with that too. So when we were filling out my logbook each time, he would just make sure he wrote down specifically, instead of like Jeppesen lesson 6 or Jeppesen lesson 23, he would write, this is what we did. We did whatever it is for commercial instrument tracks or whatever. It was required for that commercial license and the maneuvers you had to do for the commercial. So we'd write that very, very specifically in my logbook so that I could meet those Part 61 requirements, and then I could eventually take the check ride Part 61 and not have to use my GI Bill for like 220 hours of flight time. It ended up being like 40 hours of flight time for my GI Bill until I had met the Part 61 requirements. And so I met basically all those requirements, but I was also kind of running my own Part 61 syllabus, if you will. There were a couple things in that Part 61 that weren't covered in the Part 141. And what did I end up doing for those is I actually hired a freelance CFI to teach me those things. And I use that same freelance CFI to sign me off as ready for the commercial check ride. Some other things I did to help myself out with this commercial check ride is, and one of the benefits of owning your own plane is you can just go out there and practice some maneuvers in your own plane over and over and over again because you're getting your flight time and you're getting really good at these maneuvers. And to be honest, the commercial check ride maneuvers are actually pretty tough, like the power off 180, the power off 180, the lazy eights, all those things are like kind of tricky. And I kind of learned best just by like figuring out and teaching it myself. So I watched a whole bunch of YouTube videos. Shout out to all those guys that just share free videos on YouTube. It's great. I'd watch them and like, okay, today I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do power off 180s, or I'm going to do lazy eights until I figure it all out. And I would, and then I'd kind of like grade myself. And the other cool thing about owning your own plane is you can take check rides in it. Again, you learn a lot about aircraft ownership. Because one thing I was worried about was like, okay, I could be really ready for this check ride. And if like one little detail in my plane's record or my ADs aren't like perfect, then I could fail the check ride over something like that. So like I made sure everything was perfect on my plane. The one thing I couldn't do in my own plane was my commercial multi add-on. So I took that. I went back to the flight school and used Part 141 funds. They had a Piper Seneca twin, and I was actually able to do that pretty quickly. The add-on, that's a class add-on, is I don't even think there's like a minimum amount of flight time. It took me like 20 hours. At this point, I knew actually knew exactly my separation date from the military was going to be the next spring in March of 24, and this was the summer before that. I was approaching 1,000 hours of flight time. I think I hit 1,000 hours. I had my commercial multi, so I still needed 500 hours to be ready for my ATP. Or maybe I could get a Part 135 or some kind of job like that right after I got out. So I was immediately looking for what am I going to do when I get out that next spring? One thing that was a good deal at the time, it still is the Skill Bridge program. So I had a great commander that allowed me to do a skill bridge, and I was able to get hired by a great company. This company operated private jets, and they had a skill bridge program. How I came across them, I actually just went to the skill bridge website and just typed in pilot, and there were two companies there. I applied to both of them, and both of them actually offered me a pilot job with them. It was a great deal. They paid for my my type rating, a Citation 10 type rating, and let me fly as a first officer with them for those last 5 months. And that job, honestly, was probably the best deal that happened to me. So I would say do your best to apply for them. Everyone says that networking is big, and I got to say it is, because no one told me about this company. I just searched and I just emailed them, just cold emailed these people, just found their website and sent them an email, kind of a little bit about myself, what I want to do. And they brought me on, and it was a great deal. Shout out to Baker Aviation for being great, a great company there. And yeah, so those Baker Aviation is full of veterans, um, and there were so many great pilots that I flew with, so many great captains at Baker Aviation that taught me so much about how to fly jets. It was a lot different than my Piper Cherokee, but I'd say like 80%, 90% of what I know about flying private jets now was all from those guys that just took time to teach me the ropes. So always grateful for those guys for doing that. I think that pretty much wraps up uh, my process, those 4 years there. So I guess to summarize it all, come up with a game plan, a timeline to get everything done, identify uh, the requirements. So what things you need to do, by what date. For me, it was ratings by this date and flight time by these dates, and then just keep yourself on course there. You're gonna have setbacks and things, but as long as you kind of just keep your mind on what you want to do, I think it's doable. I will say during this whole process, I relied heavily on everything I learned in the military, all my aviation time in the military. It made everything a lot easier. I was pretty much a step above your typical student going through their ratings and building their flight time. So definitely use all the skills to help yourself be successful with this. All right, I think that wraps up this video. Thanks for watching. If you watch this whole thing, hopefully you learned some stuff. Yeah, this is definitely doable. And send me a message or write a comment there if you have any questions. I'll do another video here in a couple weeks. And that one I'll talk about basically how to emphasize your military experience on your resume, your application, and in your interview as well to be successful to get hired. See you guys later.